Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. I am CoachColin.com for all your merch needs. Check it out. It's episode 676. We got Joe Rogan, Reggie White, and they're talking about capitalism. Reggie has a bit of a theory on capitalism and all the world's problems. And then Joe starts talking about socialism. Then they get into AI governing. But then I have two clips of a gentleman talking about socialism. And then I kind of had a realization as I was making this video, thinking about all these things. And we're going to talk about capitalism and socialism and which is actually better. Let's get right into that. We got Joe Rogan right here. Let's get into this clip.
War. I remember when I was a little boy, I was living in San Francisco during the height of the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War ended. And I remember as a boy thinking, oh, this is great. Now there's not going to be any more wars. They figured it out. The war's bad.
Yep. They didn't.
They
didn't because wars will end. That's the one thing about war. A war will end. But does another one, what's the next war that starts?
They're always sparking up. They're always sparking up somewhere.
I have this weird theory. Well, it's not a weird theory, but and it's a gross generalization, but I think pretty much every conflict is a result of capitalism. In the sense that raw capitalism, in its nascent form, is it's just a system of trade and so forth. But the way it's been wired, because it doesn't have human well-being involved in the equation, it's just about, can we make this graph go up? We need more of these numbers, and it's just chasing infinite wealth, right? It's
right.
Wealth amassing, but so it has a value system, but human well-being's not in it. So eventually, over time, it's of course people are going to game it, and very few people are going to game it, and they're going to acquire all this stuff, and they're just going to be desensitized to the rest of the inequities and so forth, and then you're going to cause all this animosity, and then there's going to be a lot of people going well, I need to get my stuff back, and then you get all these opportunists that are using the disgruntleism and using that to arm. It's that's my gross oversimplification. I'm sure I'll be corrected millions of times over. But whenever I see any of these conflicts, or even a conflict in my own neighborhood or my neighbors arguing over, it's about a property line, or it's about you didn't do this or you didn't do that. It's this weird thought process that goes into, I don't have enough, or I have all the stuff and I want to keep the stuff, or I want more stuff. And then someone else kind of responding to that in some way. I'm not phrasing it as eloquently as I usually do on ketamine, but that's kind of my... Whenever I see all of these things, I'm just I have a feeling that it's probably maybe that. I don't know.
The problem is the alternative is even more horrific.
What's the alternative?
Socialism.
Socialism. Yeah. I don't know enough about
because the only way that's enforced is by dictators. And then the dictators wind up doing what every human being in power does, which is control all the resources, control all the wealth, live in extravagant houses while everybody starves. Every single communist dictatorship is all run the same way. It's the only way to run them. Because the only way to enforce socialism is through violence. The only way to take people's resources and evenly distribute it, you have to go in with guns.
But what about countries like Sweden and things like that? They have we have socialist systems.
We should have social systems.
Yeah, social systems. But you're talking about full-on socialism. Yeah, I'm not, that's why, here's something that's interesting. I really think within our lifetimes, if it hasn't happened already, governments are going to start using AI to do low-level legislation. And now I'm just I'm summarizing in a very optimistic way.
We've been talking about this a lot, actually.
Oh, okay, good. So I got a friend of mine, Dr. Alan D. Thompson. If you don't know about him, check him out. He's an AI expert, researcher. He's an explainer. He has a thing called The Memo that comes out, I think every 2 weeks, something like that. But it gives you a really holistic state of the union of AI. And he's hyper optimistic and calls it human evolution, which I believe in that as well. If it's used well, you get rid of the emotional factor, and you just have something that's looking to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so I think it can at least give you 5 solutions that are non-emotionally based, that are just addressed, that are supposed to kind of maximize the positive probable outcome. And I think we may see a human AI synergistic government, at least low-level government implementation. Probably some country that's can do that and not feel like they're betting the farm on it.
And if it goes well, then other people will implement it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so. We were talking about a AI president.
Yeah.
That you need a president that is immune to bias, corruption, influence, and someone who just looks at things rationally and in an intelligent way that spans all the disciplines, right? How could any president really be an expert in foreign policy, the environment, economics, social justice, infrastructure, immigration? It's not possible. How
No.
could one person really know the correct solutions to all those issues? Even if you're briefed. Look, I can't imagine. All I do is run a podcast and do comedy and occasionally commentate on fights. And all those three things take up so much of my fucking time. My whole day today has been having conversations with people about replacement opponents because there's a UFC coming on in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So I've been having all these conversations with experts and people that I know and commentators of who can fit this spot and who's ready and who's in shape and who's turned the fight down. And how could anybody? That's so minor. That's my role is so small. I have so little to do, and yet it takes up so much of my time. How could anyone manage all of those things? They can't, but AI could.
Yeah,
and
totally.
AI doesn't have a son that gets money from Burisma.
I know. It's like the thing about I know. Well, it's like, I mean, if you look at it's really hard. I had a term, I don't know if it exists, but I call it corporocrats. And most people in government essentially are corporocrats in the sense that the things that, when I see people like vetoing things or not getting on board with certain things, and you're like, well, that seems like that would be helpful, but you're choosing not to do that. It's like the influence of corporations on even well-intentioned, people that go into government, they're like, I want to make a difference. I want to make change. It just gets in there. It's so baked. It's baked in there. And so I don't know how you're gonna overcome that. The only thing I can think of is like, because my thing is like, I'm not really political in the sense that I don't have a party. I'm pretty independent. I'm just like, I want to choose people that are humble enough, that have enough humility to work with anybody that wants to solve a problem that they're wanting to solve, and to create solutions for the most amount of people possible. That's all I'm looking for, because there is no excuse for any of us being, all the inequity we see in all of this stuff is totally solvable if we were much more efficient with how resources are utilized, how they're distributed, and so forth. And what I mean by that is like, some of my friends are like, well, if you do like universal basic income, which I think is something I'm kind of in.
So he's a socialist, and he just doesn't want to say it. I mean, he says, like, Joe brings up socialism. He's like, oh, I don't know much about that. And I just have an odd thing where I don't fully believe someone when they say capitalism is the problem for all the world's every conflict that happens, but then also they don't know much about socialism. I'm like, I feel like if you looked into that enough, if you look into capitalism enough, the word socialism will pop up. If you're Googling just Google capitalism V, and it'll be versus socialism. It's really hard to not fall into it and figure out what it is. So for him to say that, I kind of don't believe him. I think even as he's describing what he's describing socialism. I think he knows that, and I think also he knows what comes along with looking like a socialist. And then, obviously it comes along with being called a communist too, eventually. And nobody wants to be seen as that. Even if you are that, you don't want to be seen as it. But yeah, when he goes into that whole thing, I think the issue there is that he is taking, when he brings up, he's like, even when the neighbors have a fight, it's usually about a property line, and I have a bunch of stuff, and I want to keep my stuff, and you keep your stuff over there. He's kind of connecting capitalism to how human beings are. That's how most people are. This is my property. It's mine. I bought it. I have it. And I don't want you encroaching on it. That's not really capitalism per se. Now, here's the thing. If that is capitalism, then then it kind of goes with how people naturally are. Which means that capitalism is a little natural. It's a little natural for people, let's just say me, to go to work and to make money and to bring the money home and make my wife's life better and my life better and our kids' lives better and only focus on us. And we accumulate the cars we need and the things we need and the food we need and the land we need. Kind of, you could look at that as like, wow, that's just pure capitalism. But that's also how people are. That's what people like to do. They like to amass as much as possible and help out friends if need be, help out family, definitely. I don't know. I was just, as he was saying that. But then also I took the critical eye towards capitalism. I'm like, is it a problem? Because here's the thing, from what I've learned about socialism, is that you're kind of giving ownership like in a lot of socialist nations, the government ends up owning or at least having a big stake in your company. And I think that's completely, you do not want that at all. You do not want that at all. Because once you give them a little bit of ownership, you've now given them a little bit of control. And by a little bit, I mean 20, 30, whatever percent. And now they're allocating your money towards certain things. That's a huge mistake. Here's the thing, though. When you look at capitalism, I get to make my money. Patrick Bet-David said it great. He said, capitalism is you get to buy what you want legally. You get to sell what you want legally. You get to try what you want legally. And most importantly, you get to fail. You get to try to fail. You get to fail on your own. And that's pretty, you need that as a society. As people, we need that. We need the freedom to try things and to fail at things so we can improve. And if we're all doing that, society slowly improves. And we've kind of seen that over time. Yes, there are many poor people, but if you viewed the poor people of the 1500s with the poor people of today are living very, very well. I think somebody even came out with some statistic of like a lot of people who are living like below poverty not have more than kings, but are like cleaner than kings, something like that. But we live pretty well just as a people. So, yeah. And then the other side is when you look at capitalism, right? What's kind of happened is the governments don't own the companies, but the companies have made so much money that now they, in a way, not fully, but in a way, have stake in the government. Whereas socialism would put stake, government would have stake in your business. They would have a little bit of control. The companies now kind of have control through lobbying, through donations. They kind of have a little bit of say. You know, a company makes $300 billion, and now the company is at a meeting or at a conference or at a gathering, and it's like, hey, Democratic Party, or hey, Republican Party, we got $400 billion, and we'll give you 10. And it's like, wow, well, we could use 10 billion. Of course, we could use that. We could do great things with that. And it's like, okay, but you kind of got to listen to what we have to say on a few topics, and, you know, and then times that by 40 different companies. And now all of a sudden it's like the companies kind of have control. And that's not good either. I never thought of that. Like, that's not that good. But then also having the government own your business, also not good. But then at the same time, they can just keep elevating the taxes, you know, and I think someone did the math and it's like you work 4 months out of the year pretty much just to pay your taxes. I don't know. I don't know where there's a solution in sight, but I do think that capitalism, even saying everything I just said, I do still think capitalism is better. And then one thing that he said the graph's involved. The thing about it is, when it comes to capitalism, he's like, oh, it's just a graph of keep going up and human well-being is not involved. That's not true. If you think of it in terms of a massive company, you could be correct. But if you think about it, and I'm going to show you 2 clips in a second, but if you think about it in terms of a person, there's a lot of human well-being involved. You know, I myself, if I'm a capitalist, I'm a business owner, I am looking out for the human well-being of myself and my family. And even if I'm focused on a chart and things keep going up, that's what I'm focused. That's at the core of it. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep a few humans in a better and better situation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's very interesting. Very interesting. But let's get to the other clips that I got here. Let's switch over. This gentleman, very distinguished looking gentleman. His name is Daniel Hannan. He has some things to say about capitalism. Let's do the first clip here.
An economic system. But what's unique about socialism is the readiness of the state to deploy coercive force. Now, we've evolved a great vocabulary to describe this. We talk about things like asking people to pay a bit more tax, right? See what happens if they choose not to. Behind all that polite sounding, asking them to pay their share, to contribute, is the threat of prison. Now, of course, there are some occasions where any society will need to rely on coercive force, on incarceration. There are some taxes that are necessary in any system. We all accept that. But the use of coercive and ultimately lethal force by the state is its most awesome and awful power. We should tilt the balance as far as we can to liberty. Before using that power should be used, as the prayer book says of marriage, reverently, discreetly, advisedly, soberly. The idea that, as we just heard from Katie, that those of us on this side are in favor of dog eat dog, if by dog eat dog you mean the desire for material improvement, that is a fundamental in human nature under all systems. You had it under the communist regimes, you had it under feudal regimes. But what is unique about capitalism is that it harnessed that ambition to a socially useful end. Under every other system devised by human intelligence, a group of people sat on top, and the way to get rich was to suck up to those in power, whether they were kings or bishops or commissars. We, uniquely, in this country, and we then exported it, came up with a system where you satisfied your ambition by serving the rest of your fellow citizens under the law.
I think that's very true. I think that's very true. You know, you have the ability to, as Patrick Bet-David said, to buy illegally, buy legally, a little Freudian slip there, sell as much as you can, whatever you can, legally, try legally, and fail. You have that option. And, you know, you used to have to suck up to just that class of people. Nowadays, you can argue that you still have to do that. You know, if you look at Hollywood's just, that's all they do. They look at the highest levels and they have to suck up and they have to do all sorts of weird things. Music industry as well. I don't know about the business world, but even still, I mean, I kind of do know about the business world. If you want to get into a certain club of people, there's things you have to do. And you do have to suck up to those people. So, but at the same time, you can choose to go, I'm doing none of that, and I'm going to build my own thing. I'm going to build something that is going to make me the money, and then going to give me the lifestyle, and going to give me the material that will help me and my family, that will satisfy my family and I. You know, even when you go back to hunter-gatherers, you can kind of see a little bit of capitalism in there. Because, you know, you think of it, you had the right to go out into the fields and you would hunt. You had the right, I'm going to play a second clip in a second. You had the right to go into the fields and hunt. You had the right to capture what you could. You know, your kill is your kill. You know, you decided, you were the warriors. The warriors got the fresh milk. They got the fresh blood. Some tribes do that. They mix it together and drink it. And they got the organs. Nutrient dense, they deserved the organs, they felt like they did, and they would bring the meat back to the tribe. The gatherers would gather the nuts and the wood and any other thing that needed to be gathered up. Now, you could say, well, that's kind of socialist because they would bring it to the tribe, but the tribe at least was very close. They were like family. We say tribe, but they were like a family. If there's 100 people and there's 15 warriors, and they all go hunting, and a bunch of hunters, and almost half the tribe goes hunting every single day, comes back. This is kind of family, more so. And yes, they come back and they distribute it to everybody, but they don't have to distribute it with the other tribe that's not doing anything all day. So it is kind of a little bit like capitalism. A little bit. I don't know. It's very interesting to think about. Here's what he has to say about socialism again here.
Afford the car. Those of us who can afford the dishwashers. There are 6 billion people, I'm sorry, I haven't got any more time. There are 6 billion people who cannot afford the cars and the dishwashers. But they will. They will as free exchange and specialization and comparative advantage run their course, raising people to a higher and higher standard of living, unless we go down the road of Cuba or Zimbabwe or any other socialist country, because this motion is that it doesn't work. Don't make the mistake of judging socialism as a textbook theory, but judging capitalism by its necessarily imperfect outcomes. Judge like with like. In the real world, you find me a functioning socialist country that has delivered more than a free market alternative. Now, I'm going to finish with this.
And yeah, that's that last clip there. I mean, yeah, think about that, because even as Reggie Watts was speaking, he was kind of speaking like, again, like exactly what this gentleman said, kind of talking like, you know, he's using exactly what this gentleman just said. Socialism is a textbook theory. Like, it works in theory, but like, show us where it works in the real world. And in capitalism, it works in theory. Show us where it works in the real world. Well, there's examples of capitalism working. Now, is it working incredibly for every single person? No. But it could. And that's what that gentleman was just touching on. He's like, they can't afford dishwashers and whatever else he mentioned. He's like, but they will. And that, I identified with that a lot, because I was one of those people. I was definitely one of those people. I lived below the poverty line for a very long time. And I had to do a lot of different things in order to survive. A lot of stuff. And slowly, I had the option, I had the ability, I had the freedom to try different things and build up my skill set and learn what I was good at. And I started utilizing my natural skills, and I started taking the skills that I learned, and I built up my situation more and more and more. I met an amazing woman. We built up more and more and more. And now I'm one of those people that has a dishwasher, and I have a camera, and I have some lights, and I have a bunch of other things. And I feel like anybody can do that. I don't want to sound like, you know, some black people don't like the whole, like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But it's like, if you got them, if you got the boots, pull up those straps. If you don't got the boots, figure out where you can buy them, figure out how much they cost, figure out what you got to do to make that money, then get your bootstraps and pull them up. It's literally what I had to do. It's tough, but it's doable. But it's only doable in a capitalistic society. Yeah. Then the alternative, when you look at the socialist society, not always possible. You don't have the freedom to expand your skills. You don't have the freedom to rise up from where you're at. You don't have the freedom to say, I'm here today and I will be up here tomorrow, or, you know, years from now, and I'm going to work towards that. You don't have that. You have to stay where you are. And if you do by chance get up there, well, you'll be brought down considerably because, again, distributing to everybody. I don't know. As much as I don't like the idea of companies owning the government, because, I mean, it's hard to argue that they don't. They really do, in a sense. And I'm about to do an episode on that in a little bit. But also the alternative. And then right back to what Rogan said and that gentleman said. In order to distribute the resources, you would have to use force. And it's exactly like the British gentleman said. He was like, you know, they're saying it politely, but try and say, no, I'm not doing that. And then what happens? Then you realize where you really are, you know? And that becomes a very hairy situation in and of itself. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments what you think about all that. Yeah, let me know where you stand. You want to see some socialism in the world? You want to see some capitalism? You love your capitalism that you have right now in front of you? You have the option to grow and build businesses and do great things? Or do you want some socialism? Or are you one of those wild people that wants some communism? Because you're just like, I don't like all this freedom. Yeah? Are you one of those people? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't liked the episode already, like the episode. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe. We're making 1 to 3 videos a day. Gets hard to keep up unless you hit that notification bell. I'm out.